Hi, this is Nick Lalonde, your host of What's Next, making your third act your best act. Today you're going to hear from Larry Schachter, who lives and works in the Big Apple. Larry is the head of tech for a real estate company. What stuck out to me in my conversation with Larry is he's 67 years old, but he said he has a lot of tread left on his tires. He loves helping his company stay efficient and save money. Be sure to listen in when Larry talks about where he finds community and stays in touch with his large network. He mentioned that Mark Zuckerberg had him in mind when creating an application like Facebook. I hope you'll enjoy my conversation with Larry as much as I did. Well, Larry, thank you so much for coming on What's Next, making your third act your best act. A fun fact that I think everyone should know about you that you shared with me prior to us visiting today is that if you could do it all over again, you'd be an airline pilot. Why is that?
I love to fly. I love every time I get on a plane. And I've flown extensively for business for 3 years during the pandemic. I was commuting back and forth to Buffalo, New York. And so I've really gotten to understand flying, understand what goes on in the cockpit and how they navigate, and done a good deal of reading on my own, what all the bells mean. And I just think that it's, even when I'm stuck in the airport, my flight is delayed for 2.5 hours, I'm still feeling pretty good that I'm in an airport and I'm going to get on a plane, I'm going to fly, I'm going to get to where I'm going to. And that's really what it is. I just enjoy it.
I love that. Well, that would be, do you have any goals of maybe being a pilot when you transition away from your career at some point? Would you buy a plane? Would you?
Likely not. It's fairly involved, and I live in Manhattan.
Yeah.
So, and one of the things that people in Manhattan generally don't own, and me being one of them, is a car. So we take public transportation pretty much anywhere because the cost of a garage in Manhattan can be anywhere from $700 to $1,000 a month for the garage. So just think of what my rent is. And so from that perspective, yeah, I rent a car when I need to rent a car, et cetera. But, don't think I would entertain that. It's fairly intensive and quite costly, which was really, the barrier back, 35, 40 years ago when I was first kind of got that little bug in my head. Could I make that happen? It would have been, from a cost perspective, it would have been at that time probably equivalent to another 2 or 3 years of college.
Yeah, I imagine, parking a car in Manhattan is really expensive. Parking your own personal airplane would be even more expensive.
Yes.
So I'm super curious. You're 67 years old, and one of the comments that you've made to me in the past is you said, Nick, I have a lot of tread left on my tires, right? I really enjoy what I do. Would you mind walking me through your retirement journey? You're the director of IT today for a real estate company. But what are your thoughts as you approach retirement and think about it?
You know what? Still working full time. I really haven't thought about what it's going to look like. I may reach a point where I just, leave my current employer and just look for something part-time, look for something advisory, serving on an advisory board or something, maybe even, I actually had a conversation with someone who may want to have me guest lecture at NYU. So, just kind of keeping everything wide open. But again, when I get to the point where I'm in my, and I hit that magic number of 70 and really start to look at, what I'm doing. I mean, thank goodness I'm in good health and my wife is in good health, and we want to kind of enjoy everything that we've worked for the last 3+ decades, almost 4 decades. So, from that perspective, want to be able to enjoy it, travel. By then I should have, God willing, grandchildren and kind of enjoy life. So, and not to have the grind of, forget a 40-hour work week, but when you do what I do, I'm answerable to, the C-suite of my company, literally 24/7.
Yeah. So interesting. So it sounds like at some point you may look to transition to part-time, maybe sit on a board, maybe even teach
Yeah.
in an advisory capacity. But it sounds like 70 is a magic number for you. Why is 70 a magic number?
I don't know. Maybe if nothing else, it's as simple as when my Social Security fully vests.
Yeah. And have you crunched the numbers? I mean, is there something that happens at 70 other than Social Security, or it's just a target that you have?
It's just kind of a target because I do want to have a number of good, healthy years left to be able to travel. My wife and I, over the last, uh, I want to say, dozen or so years, have traveled a lot more than we did in the first, 2/3 of our marriage, and we enjoy it. And I love seeing new places. Obviously, I've told you that I love to fly somewhere, and I am a airline points whore, and I will try to do everything I can to accumulate points. So when I do take these flights to Europe or places far away, I can get upgraded to first class. And I really kind of embrace the science, and it is the science of doing that. So, you know, it's just a matter of kind of being able to enjoy that and take advantage of that because you never know what's around the next corner. And when somebody can have a health issue and the world changes. And but I know, as I get well into my 70s, the chances for things not working as well as perhaps you might want them to, uh, increases. And I will tell you quite frankly that at my current age now, I do everything I possibly can do to stave that off. I'm on my Peloton 3 to 4 times a week. I take Pilates 2 to 3 times a week, and I really work to stay active. And, it's really, as I speak to my peers, we all kind of understand that for us to be able to physically enjoy our later years, we have to take care of ourselves and we have to
Mm.
watch our weight and watch how we eat and stay active and get our heart rates up. And, that's not to say that something's not going to happen, but it certainly minimizes it. So,
Mm, mm. So let's crystal ball for a second. You're 70 years old, that you've hit your magic number. You now can look up and say, hey, I'm going to transition maybe more into a part-time capacity somewhere. I'm going to
yeah.
travel. Why are you still working at this point? I mean, what is work providing you that makes you want to continue working if you've already hit all the numbers you need?
First, I find it interesting. I find it enjoyable. Working in technology is something that's changing on a regular basis. So there's always something new to learn. There's always something that's changing, and it's interesting.
Mm,
And I just like to help people and build things and make things better. And that's just kind of how I am. You know, I'm the type of person when the box comes from IKEA, I can't wait to dive in and put it together, as opposed to the people who are just kind of like, oh my God, I gotta, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to understand these directions, et cetera, et cetera? And I'm just absolutely opposite. I build computers for myself and people in my spare time. I like to build things. I like to put things together. I like to have a project. I like to just kind of keep things running properly, running smooth, making sure that in my apartment, the air conditioning filters are cleaned or changed out as needed. That, we really keep the place up. And again, just like myself, staying healthy, I keep the apartment healthy and everything working by, you know, keeping up with the maintenance.
would you go crazy if you didn't have work at 70 and beyond?
If I didn't have something to occupy my time. And it's funny, I had lunch with a friend of mine. That's why I was a couple minutes late today. He is 78, and he's telling me I should take up golf because golf occupies huge blocks of time.
Are you a golfer?
I am
You
not.
said you
I
should.
made the
Yeah.
I made the decision about 25 years ago. I was in my 40s. My kids had kind of hit that point where we didn't have to watch them every second of the day and I could get out and do something, I said, either I'm going to take up golf or I'm going to take out bike riding, cycling. And I chose the latter. So again, now what I do is I have a road bike and I ride. Yeah, I don't ride my road bike in Manhattan; it's just too dangerous. But I will go out to New Jersey and bring my bike, or go out to Long Island and take my bike and ride out there, getting 20, 30, 40 miles in the course of a day. And that's kind of my hobby. And I love that.
Mm.
But unfortunately, where we are here, I'm kind of limited. And that's, kind of a 7, 8 months a year sport. And, you know, it's not something I can do now, but I'm sure that, once I am of retirement age, I'll hope to be getting on the bike quite a bit more than I have, in these last couple of years.
What do you think gives you purpose today? What gets you fired up to get out of bed in the morning?
Just what each day is going to bring. What can I solve? What can I make better? What can we fix? What can we address? Uh, and that can be work or that can be personal. That can be, a project I'm working on with my kids. It can be, dealing with an insurance issue. Uh, just taking it and making it better.
Do you find that work mainly provides that purpose, or do you find,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and so at 70 and beyond, it sounds really important then that you're staying engaged and solving problems in some capacity. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
You wouldn't just be able to sit around the apartment and fix up your Manhattan apartment or travel across the globe, 24/7. You would need something to do that's keeping you mentally stimulated in order to.
Absolutely. And you read these stories, uh, you know, part of the problem with health information on the internet is that it's totally unfiltered. But, you do read that people who stay mentally engaged, do stave off things like dementia and Alzheimer's and things like that. And having seen, lost my mother-in-law had to dementia. Uh, you want to, like, just like everything else, just like riding my Peloton, I want to
Mm.
keep myself physically and mentally fit so I can, enjoy the later years.
So your mother-in-law who had dementia, was she getting mental stimulation in some way in her later years?
Probably not as much as she should. And it was relatively quick. She was, now, my personal experiences, I thought that unbeknownst to everybody, she had had a stroke, a small
Mm.
stroke that kind of knocked her sideways, if you will. And, you know, that, that was when we first noticed it. She started seeing neurologists and, she was gone within the year. So,
Wow. So it happened really fast.
yeah, yeah, it happened relatively quickly. I didn't see it coming. And granted, I didn't see her as much as my wife did, or my father-in-law, or my sister-in-law, but they were in Florida for half the year. But I've seen her enough times over the 4 or 5 months immediately prior to her first, being diagnosed, to really not
Hmm.
see much of anything.
Hmm. I keep hearing that from high achievers. Actually, a retired doctor I talked to, he said, Nick, it's like any other muscle. If you don't use it, you lose it,
Yeah,
right? And so it's so important to stay mentally engaged. I've heard some high achievers, it's so funny, but they quote unquote retire, right? And then they transition into their retirement job where they're doing taxes
yeah.
seasonally, right? Just to stay mentally active, or maybe they get into consulting. Um, what do you think that would look like for you, right? So if
That's
it's
certainly
not
a
working full
possibility.
time.
I have had consulting roles in the past. It's something that I'm sure I could be successful at. Yeah,
And then what about some hobbies? So I've heard traveling, right? You like to
yeah,
fly. It sounds like cycling. I mean, what are
yeah.
some things that you would do to find community in
You
retirement? Because I
know,
know that.
look, I have my New York sports teams. Haven't seen much success recently, but I have my Mets and my Jets, and the Knicks are actually pretty good this year. So keep an eye on them, and we'll go to as many games as possible. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the things. The other thing that's kind of changed in the last half dozen years or so is I've become much more aware around current events and politics and things like that. I think part of that is just because of the news cycle has become so immediate, and being in technology, I'm an avid Twitter user and I'm an avid Instagram user. I actually get most of my news over Twitter,
Hmm.
as opposed to going to Wall Street Journal website, New York Times website, and things like that, because I've gotten to the point with Twitter where I have the people and the teams that I follow kind of align with my interests, whether it be around news, sports, my political views, my hobbies and things like that. So I'm really getting a constant curated feed of the
Hmm.
things that I'm interested in. But, by the same token, with, the way the world is today and the way the country is today, one of the things I do try to do is to listen to the other side a little bit more, because I think
Hmm.
that the media on both sides from many angles is just really kind of providing a one-sided view. And I think it's necessary to kind of at least hear other views. You can have your opinions and your and the things that you believe in and you're passionate about, and things that you don't believe in that you think are just terrible. But it's always good to kind of hear things from the other side. Just like I tell my kids, whenever they're in a situation with a coworker or a friend, I said, always try to look at it from that person's perspective, just to
Hmm.
kind of say, have I looked at everything here? Am I looking at the entire universe of situations, options, just to kind of be able to make the proper judgment?
Hmm. Yeah, I think one of the greatest predictors for longevity of life in our third act of life, what we call retirement, is community. And so when I asked you where you'd find community, it sounds like the first place you went was mentioning New York sports teams. And
Yeah.
so it sounds like you guys go to as many games as possible. Do you have a big network of friends that are also going to these games or that you see on
I
a
have
regular
some, but
basis?
you talk about community.
Yeah.
When they made Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg must have had me in mind, because uh, I've been into that in 2007, hook, line, and sinker. Found all my high school friends, found all my college friends. Yes, I had stayed in touch with many people, and I'm very good at that. And, one of the things that people say about me is that I know a lot of people. And so, I stay active with my family and friends on Facebook. I stay active professionally on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my marketing tool. LinkedIn is where I kind of put myself out professionally. That's my professional commercial, is my LinkedIn profile. So, and that's how I interact with a lot of my, professional peers. So, yes, I do find community in those social networks and through social networking. And it's been, for all the crap that Zuckerberg and Elon Musk take, you know, my life has been enriched over the last
Hmm.
15, 17 years because of it.
Wow. So it sounds like, I mean, when they created these platforms, they had you in mind and your sense of community and all the people that you've networked with over the past few decades,
And
you're
it's
able
just,
to
it's
now
just,
stay in touch with.
it facilitates, we used to call people on the phone, and that used to cost money. And
Hmm.
then, 1995, I'll say 1992. I was started with email in 1991, I remember, on CompuServe. But 1995, email became ubiquitous. People started having internet circuits in their home. the old dial-up on your phone line, and people would have a second line, and then the broadband came in. So we've had for the last 30 years this wonderful thing called the internet, which you know has just made it so incredibly easy for us to get at information, find things out. And this morning I was looking at a contract, and I needed to another add a section of a contract which basically said something to the effect that while we can make recommendations on cybersecurity, we can't guarantee that that the company will be kept safe. And I just logged into ChatGPT and I said, write me a contract clause that says that, and what it came up with was unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah. Technology is incredible, and I think AI is really going to change how we know technology. I think you're absolutely right. I'm finding more and more too that your demographic is adopting AI at a very fast rate, is what it looks like, and just has such an appetite for it.
But there are people my age who haven't embraced technology, and I went through this with my in-laws who always felt they never had a computer, they never really embraced technology, and they always, to a fault, felt that they were being persecuted against because they would have to call up JetBlue to make airline reservations. They couldn't do it online. And of course, we would do it for them, but they took it very personally that they were that there was so much that they didn't do or couldn't do because they weren't active online. And from my perspective, everything that is just everything that the internet and applications and smartphones offer just makes your life that much fuller. Just again, when you do what I do, working in technology and real estate companies, what's the biggest challenge for my company is getting information quickly that's manageable, that's digestible, that can allow for decision making. And our smartphones in the consumer world just do this, from being able to walk into Best Buy and see something you want to buy and then go look it up on Amazon or Walmart and see if it's cheaper.
And Larry, I want to get back to the retirement piece real quick.
Yeah.
and just what's next. I'm curious, for anyone else that that's made this transition, are they working in part-time roles, or are they serving on boards, or are they consulting, kind of like you're thinking of doing?
I really don't know that many people who have started retirement. I have one good friend who did about 2 years ago, also in his late 60s, and he's not doing much of anything. He, when I look at him and his hobbies, yes, like me, he's very interested in the sports teams, very interested in music as I am. Had a huge collection of sports memorabilia that he accumulated over 50 plus years, and basically sold it off in bulk because he's looking to sell his house up in New Jersey and move to a different place, and just couldn't move all of it down there. So he basically all that years, so he's not really doing that much of anything. Yes, he's got, two new grandchildren, and that keeps them busy. But, he is not really, when you pose the question, and I look at him as kind of one friend who's really retired, not doing much of anything.
Has that taken a toll on him, you think?
I don't know. I really don't know. But it's interesting. We'll get together a couple times during the year, and again, since we know he used to live across the street from us when we lived in the suburbs, and since we moved into Manhattan, we don't see him as much. Plus, he's down in Florida for half the winter. for half the year. So, from that perspective, uh, when he and I get together, now that I kind of thought of it, we're close enough friends that we can have that kind of a frank discussion, if no other reason than to kind of
Yeah.
prepare me for what I have to look forward to.
And I'm curious too. You said, Nick, I mean, I know a lot of people. I'm pretty well connected, right? I've networked over the years. But I don't have many friends who are retired. And
Yeah.
so given that you're 67, I imagine you have a lot of colleagues or friends that are similar to your age. Is that correct?
Yeah, and most of them are still, virtually all of them are still working.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. Um, I think part of it could be because they really weren't thinking of their future and perhaps didn't save for their retirement, perhaps as well as they should have.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I've always thought fairly conservatively and, always kind of knew that retirement was coming, just like I knew college was coming. I'll never forget, when my oldest was getting to that age and he was like a sophomore in high school. And we went to that first college meeting where they talked about college costs and scholarships and grants and college finances and everything. And I was sitting next to this guy who was the father of a friend of my son's. And frankly, this guy, you know, lived in a 5,000 square foot home on the nice side of town and um, you know, beautiful foreign cars and everything. And he looks at me and he says, I don't know how I'm going to pay for this. And I looked at him, I said, you didn't know this was coming? And I'm like, I'm shaking my head. Whereas I had always knew that I was going to have to, that my kids were most likely to go to college, was have to be paid for somehow, and was able to do so and did not saddle them with debt. And again, as I talk about them and their values, they are truly appreciative, knowing that many of their friends, or have college, post-college debt, and they don't. But I knew that that was coming, and I knew that I was going to have to retire. And I prepared for it as best I could and probably, had somewhat of a smaller house, took fewer vacations, fewer luxuries, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, than I otherwise might have if I wasn't always kind of thinking ahead, thinking down the road, thinking
Mm.
long term.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, right? When we talk about saving and spending, there's delayed gratification. I think
Yeah.
it's Dave Ramsey who says, "Live like no one else today, so you can live like no one else tomorrow," which I think is a very thought-provoking line.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is you made the sacrifice, it sounds like, on the front end, and has that afforded you the ability? I mean, how long have you been working today where you feel like, hey, I just show up to work because I want to, not because I have to, because you've achieved financial independence? Have you been financially independent for a number of years?
But I think I'm pretty much there now. I think that's a very difficult concept to really kind of say, are you or aren't you? Because
Yeah.
just like, is it ever enough? Maybe, when you get into, you know, 10 or 11, uh, what, uh, 8 or 9 figures, that I think
Yeah.
is, you really don't have to worry. But, I don't
I think
know.
even the people with 8 or 9 figures would argue with you that it's not enough, right?
Well, again, because, their lifestyles obviously are, different than mine.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So if I heard you correctly, you said, Nick, that's a hard answer because is it ever enough? And so, but 70 wasn't a number that we chose because of financial independence. You feel like you're there, but more, right, could be better potentially,
Yeah,
right? I mean, and that's what work provides you, is maybe a little bit more income and delays from having to take from investments. So we're right at the end here, Larry. I just have one more question for you. And
sure.
knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently in your career?
knowing what I know now, what would I have done differently in my career? It depends kind of when I'm asked that question. You know, maybe if I would have realized it earlier enough, I would have taken that new career path and become a pilot. Look, I changed my career about 25 years ago. I moved out of accounting and finance and into technology. Um, so, I understand change. But again, I think I've done pretty good with what I've had and what I've had to work with. And, as I said, I'm here in my late 60s and, pretty well set up for retirement. It's interesting because I see that lump of assets that I have, and it's like, I just don't want to touch it. I don't want to touch it yet. I want to kind of keep it, let it grow and accumulate and all that other stuff. So I want it to keep happening.
Absolutely. Well, Larry, thank you so much for your time today. It was so fun having you on What's Next, making your third act your best yet. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.